The morning sun rose over New Eden, painting the wide fields in golden light. This small human colony sat far from the busy core worlds, where only 3,000 people called it home. Most were simple farmers who wanted a quiet life growing crops and raising their children in peace. Katie Miller woke up early as she did every day. The 12-year-old girl had bright eyes and a smile that could warm anyone's heart. Her father, John Miller, ran the colony as its administrator, while her mother, Linda, taught at the local school. Katie was special in a way that everyone could see, but no one could quite explain. She walked through the dirt streets waving at neighbors who were already starting their daily work. Old Frank Davis was in his vegetable garden pulling weeds from between the tomato plants. His back hurt these days, so Katie always stopped to help him. "Morning, Mr. Davis," Katie said, kneeling down to help with the weeds. "The tomatoes look really good today." Frank smiled at her. At 72 years old, he had lived through many hardships, but Katie's kindness always made him feel better. "That's because you helped me plant them, little one." These old hands couldn't do it alone anymore. After helping Frank, Katie walked to the school where her mother worked. The building was simple but clean, with bright paintings made by the children covering the walls. Inside, Katie found a group of younger kids sitting in a circle looking upset. "What's wrong?" Katie asked, sitting down with them. 7-year-old Ben looked up with tears in his eyes. "My pet rabbit ran away yesterday. I can't find him anywhere." Katie thought for a moment. She had always been good with animals, better than most adults even. "Let's go look for him together after school. I bet he's just scared and hiding somewhere safe." This was typical for Katie. She always tried to help others, no matter how small their problems seemed. The other children loved her because she never made fun of them, or acted like she was better than them, even though her father was the colony leader. The colony had been peaceful for 5 years now, ever since the Zephyrian Empire had taken control of this part of space. The Zephyrians were tall, gray-skinned aliens with cold yellow eyes and voices that sounded like metal scraping against stone. They ruled hundreds of star systems and controlled millions of other alien species. Commander Vexthul led the Zephyrian garrison on New Eden. He was 8 feet tall with scars covering his arms from old battles. His yellow eyes showed no warmth or kindness, only the cold calculation of a career soldier. To him, humans were just another weak species that the Empire had conquered. The Zephyrians had a simple rule: obey completely or face punishment. They saw human emotions as weakness and human compassion as stupidity. In their culture, only strength mattered, and strength meant the ability to dominate others. Every month, the humans had to give the Zephyrians food, minerals, and manufactured goods as tribute. It was the price of being allowed to live on New Eden. Most colonists accepted this arrangement because the alternative was death or slavery on some distant world. But Katie didn't understand why people had to be mean to each other. She was too young to grasp the politics of interstellar empires and alien conquest. All she knew was that the Zephyrian soldiers looked sad and angry all the time, and she wanted to help them feel better. One afternoon, while playing near the landing pad, where the Zephyrian ships were parked, Katie picked a handful of wildflowers. They were small and purple, with a sweet smell that reminded her of her grandmother's perfume back on Earth. She thought they might make Commander Vexthul smile. Katie walked up to the tall alien commander while he was inspecting his troops. The soldiers stopped their drill and stared at the small human girl approaching their leader. Vexthul turned his cold yellow eyes toward her, surprised that any human would dare to interrupt his military exercise. "Hello, sir," Katie said, holding out the flowers with a shy smile. "I picked these for you. They smell really nice, and I thought they might make you happy." The Zephyrian soldiers looked shocked. In their culture, approaching a superior officer without permission was a serious offense. But Katie didn't know about their rules. She only saw someone who looked unhappy and wanted to help. Vexthul stared down at the small girl and her gift, the flowers. For a moment, something strange flickered in his yellow eyes. It might have been confusion, or perhaps even a tiny spark of something that could have been warmth. But then his military training took over, and his expression became cold again. "Take your weeds and go away, human child," he said in his harsh voice. "I have no use for such things." Katie's smile faded a little, but she didn't give up. Are you sure? They really do smell nice. Maybe you could give them to someone you care about? This question confused Vexthul even more. The idea of giving gifts to show affection was foreign to Zephyrian culture. They showed respect through obedience and fear, not through flowers and kind words. Go away, he repeated, turning back to his soldiers, and do not interrupt us again. Katie walked away sadly, still holding the purple flowers. She didn't understand why the commander had been so mean when she was just trying to be nice. Her mother found her later sitting by herself near the school. What's wrong, sweetie? Linda Miller asked, sitting down next to her daughter. I tried to give flowers to the alien commander, but he was mean to me, Katie said. Why don't they like nice things, Mom? Linda struggled to explain something she didn't fully understand herself. Some people have had hard lives, Katie. Sometimes when people have been hurt a lot, they forget how to be happy about small, beautiful things. That's really sad, Katie said. I wish I could help them remember. Unknown to the peaceful colonists of New Eden, the Zephyrian Empire was facing growing problems across its territory. Other conquered species were starting to rebel against their harsh rule. The Empire's response was always the same: crush any resistance with overwhelming force and make examples of those who dared to disobey. The Zephyrians believed that fear was the only way to maintain order across hundreds of different worlds and species. They had built their empire on the principle that strength meant the ability to make others afraid, and they had never encountered a species quite like humans before. Humans were puzzling to the Zephyrians. They could be fierce fighters, when necessary, but they also showed kindness to their enemies. They formed emotional bonds that made them willing to sacrifice themselves for others. They created art and music and stories for no practical purpose except joy. Most confusing of all was their treatment of their young. Human children like Katie were protected and cherished, not trained for battle from birth like Zephyrian offspring. The aliens couldn't understand why humans wasted so much time and energy on beings who couldn't contribute to military strength. As the days passed on New Eden, Katie continued her daily routine of helping others and spreading kindness wherever she went. She helped Ben find his lost rabbit, read stories to the younger children, and even left more flowers near the Zephyrian compound, hoping that someone might appreciate them. She had no way of knowing that her simple acts of kindness were about to change the course of galactic history forever. 3 weeks after Katie's flower incident, the monthly tribute collection arrived. This was always a tense time for the colonists. They had to load their best crops, refined metals, and handmade goods onto Zephyrian transport ships. The aliens took whatever they wanted and left the humans with just enough to survive. Pete Johnson, a farmer who grew corn and wheat, was operating the large loading machine that day. He was nervous, as he always was around the Zephyrians. His hands shook slightly as he moved the heavy cargo containers toward the alien ship. The machine was old and sometimes made strange noises, but it was all the colony could afford. Among the cargo was something special that day. The Zephyrians had demanded a sacred crystal artifact that the humans had found in an old ruins site. The crystal was beautiful, glowing with soft blue light, and covered in alien writing that nobody could read. Commander Vexthul had claimed it belonged to an ancient Zephyrian temple and must be returned to the Empire. John Miller stood nearby, watching the loading process with worried eyes. As colony administrator, he was responsible for making sure everything went smoothly. His wife Linda stood beside him, and Katie played with some other children near the edge of the landing pad. The little girl was making flower chains, humming a happy song to herself. "Be careful with that container, Pete," John called out. "That crystal is apparently very important to them." Pete nodded and wiped sweat from his forehead. The container, holding the crystal, was heavier than expected, and his old loading machine was struggling. He could hear grinding noises coming from the hydraulic system. The machine had been acting up for weeks, but they couldn't afford to fix it properly. Commander Vexthul watched the loading process with his cold yellow eyes. He stood perfectly still, his gray hands clasped behind his back. To him, this was a routine operation, Another reminder to the humans of who was in charge. The crystal wasn't actually sacred to his people, but claiming it was gave him an excuse to take something valuable from the colony. The other Zephyrian soldiers formed a line nearby, their weapons ready, but not drawn. They looked bored by the whole process. This was just another day of collecting tribute from weak aliens who couldn't resist even if they wanted to. Pete carefully lifted the container with the crystal inside. Everything seemed to be going well until the hydraulic arm of his machine suddenly jerked sideways. A seal had burst, spraying hydraulic fluid everywhere. The mechanical arm swung out of control, and Pete desperately tried to stop it. "Look out!" he shouted, but it was too late. The container slipped from the machine's grip and crashed to the ground with a terrible sound. The protective padding split open, and the blue crystal rolled out onto the hard concrete. For a moment it seemed like it might be okay, but then a crack appeared along its surface. The crack spread quickly, like lightning frozen in glass. Within seconds, the crystal broke into dozens of pieces, its blue light flickering and dying. The beautiful artifact that had glowed for thousands of years was now just scattered fragments on the ground. Everyone froze. The humans stared in horror at the broken crystal, knowing that this was very bad. The Zephyrian soldiers straightened up, their hands moving to their weapons. Commander Vexthul's yellow eyes grew even colder than usual. "I'm sorry," Pete said quickly, his voice shaking. "The machine malfunctioned. It was an accident, I swear. I didn't mean for this to happen." John Miller stepped forward, trying to stay calm. "Commander, this was clearly an accident. Pete is our best equipment operator. He would never damage your property on purpose." Vexthul walked slowly toward the broken crystal. His heavy boots crunched on the fragments as he examined the damage. When he looked up, his face showed no emotion, but the humans could sense his anger like heat from a fire. "In Zephyrian law," he said in his harsh voice, "destroying sacred artifacts is an act of rebellion. The penalty is death." The colonists gasped. Linda Miller grabbed her husband's arm, while Pete fell to his knees beside his broken machine. "Please," John begged. "It was an accident. We can pay extra tribute, work longer hours, anything you want. Just please don't hurt anyone." But Vexthul had already made his decision. In Zephyrian culture, accidents were no excuse. If you couldn't control your actions, you were weak. If you were weak, you deserved to die. More importantly, the other conquered species needed to see what happened to those who damaged Zephyrian property, even by accident. "One of you will die as an example to the others," Vexthul announced. "Choose quickly, or I will choose for you." The humans looked at each other in terror. How could they choose who should die? Pete stepped forward, tears in his eyes. "It was my fault," he said. "I'll take the punishment." But then other voices joined in. Frank Davis, despite his old age, volunteered to take Pete's place. Linda Miller said she would go instead of leaving her husband without a wife. Other colonists stepped forward, each trying to sacrifice themselves to save the others. Katie had been listening to all of this from where she played with the other children. She didn't fully understand what death meant, but she could see that all the adults were very scared. She could hear her mother crying and see her father's hands shaking. The 12-year-old girl stood up, her flower chain still in her small hands. She walked toward the group of adults, her steps slow but determined. The other children watched her go, too frightened to speak. "I'll go," Katie said in her clear young voice. Everyone turned to look at her. Her parents rushed toward her, but Zephyrian soldiers blocked their way. "Katie, no," her mother screamed. "Go back to the other children. This isn't for you to worry about." But Katie shook her head. She looked up at Commander Vexthul with the same innocent expression she had worn when offering him flowers. "The adults have important work to do," she said simply. "They need to take care of everyone else. I'm just a kid. It makes more sense for me to go instead of them." Vexthul stared down at the small human child. In his mind, her offer made perfect sense. Children were useless until they were old enough to work or fight. Taking a child would be an efficient way to send his message without losing valuable workers. "Acceptable," he said. The word hit the colonists like a physical blow. John and Linda Miller fought against the soldiers holding them back, screaming their daughter's name. Other parents pulled their own children away from the scene, not wanting them to see what was about to happen. Katie looked back at her parents with sad but brave eyes. "It's okay," she told them. "I love you both very much. Take care of the flowers I planted, okay?" What happened next would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. In the town square of New Eden, with the entire colony forced to watch, Commander Vexthal carried out his punishment. Katie Miller, 12 years old, who had never hurt anyone and only wanted to make people happy, died for the crime of trying to help load a broken crystal onto an alien ship. The colonists wept openly, but they were too afraid to fight back. The Zephyrian soldiers stood guard, making sure everyone watched. This was the lesson their commander wanted to teach. This is what happens when you fail the Empire, even by accident. As Katie's body was carried away, something changed in the humans watching. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Something darker and more dangerous than the Zephyrians had ever seen in the peaceful farmers of New Eden. That night, John Miller sat in his empty house, staring at his daughter's bedroom. On her desk was the flower chain she had been making when she died. Beside it was a drawing she had made of the whole colony, with everyone smiling and holding hands. With shaking fingers, John activated his communication console and began recording a message. It was addressed to his brother-in-law, Admiral Jack, Turner of the Earth Defense Fleet, but John knew it would reach much further than that. The message began with 4 simple words that would echo across human space. "They killed my daughter." John Miller's message reached Earth 3 days later. Admiral Jack Turner was eating breakfast in his quarters aboard the battleship Titan when the communication came through. He was Katie's uncle, though he had only met his brother-in-law's daughter twice during family visits. Still, he remembered her bright smile and the way she had insisted on showing him her pet hamster. The message was simple but devastating. John's voice was broken as he spoke directly to the camera, his eyes red from crying. Behind him, Linda sat holding Katie's favorite stuffed animal, too shocked to speak. "Jack, they killed my daughter," John said, his words barely a whisper. "She was 12 years old. She offered herself to save others, and they murdered her in cold blood. They made us all watch. I'm sending you the security footage. I don't know what to do. I can't even think straight." Admiral Turner watched the security footage 3 times before he fully understood what he was seeing. Katie Miller, a child who should have been worried about school tests and playground games, calmly walking toward her death to protect the adults around her. The cold alien commander accepting her sacrifice without any emotion at all. Turner was a career military officer. He had fought in border conflicts and pirate raids. He had seen soldiers die and had ordered men into dangerous missions. But he had never seen anything like this brutal execution of an innocent child. Within an hour, Turner had violated every regulation in the Earth Defense Fleet handbook. He sent copies of John's message to every ship captain, every base commander, and every government official he knew. He marked it as urgent military intelligence and bypassed normal communication channels. The message spread through human space like wildfire. Captain Lisa Park received it aboard her patrol ship near the Centauri system. Commander Alex Ross got it at a supply depot on the edge of human territory. Colonel Mike Stone saw it at the military academy, where he trained new officers. But it wasn't just the military who saw Katie's story. Somehow the message found its way to civilian networks too. News reporters picked it up. Business executives received copies from their security departments. Even children in schools across human space heard about the little girl who had died to save others. The reaction was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. President Maria Santos was in a budget meeting when her chief of staff burst into the room with a tablet computer. She watched John Miller's message in complete silence, her face growing paler with each passing second. "Get me Admiral Turner on a secure line," she said quietly, "and cancel all my appointments for the rest of the week." "Ma'am, you have the trade summit tomorrow and the—" "Cancel everything," Santos repeated, her voice now hard as steel. "And call an emergency session of Congress. We're going to war." But the government's reaction was nothing compared to what happened among ordinary humans. Factory workers walked off their jobs to volunteer for military service. Retired soldiers came out of retirement and reported to recruitment centers. Corporate executives liquidated their personal assets to fund weapons production. Sarah Williams ran a small restaurant on Mars Colony. She'd never been interested in politics or military affairs. When she saw Katie's story on the news, she closed her restaurant and drove straight to the nearest recruitment office. "I want to join the fleet," she told the surprised recruiter. "Ma'am, you're 43 years old and have no military experience," the young sergeant replied. "That little girl was someone's daughter," Sarah said simply. "Someone needs to pay for what they did to her." The same scene played out across hundreds of human worlds. Doctors volunteered to serve as field medics. Engineers offered to design better weapons. Even elderly grandparents demanded to contribute, somehow, to the war effort. Admiral Turner found himself promoted to Supreme Commander of all human military forces within a week. His first order was to recall every human ship from patrol duty and concentrate the entire fleet. His second order shocked even his own officers. "We're not just going to attack the Zephyrians," he announced at the emergency command meeting. "We're going to liberate every species they've enslaved." Captain Park raised her hand. "Sir, that would mean fighting across hundreds of star systems. We don't have the resources for that kind of campaign." Turner smiled grimly. "We do now. Check the production reports from the industrial worlds." The reports were incredible. Human shipyards that normally built one vessel per month were now launching one per week. Factories that made civilian goods had switched to producing weapons and armor. The entire human economy had transformed itself for war in just 2 weeks. But Turner wasn't relying just on human resources. He had studied the intelligence reports about other species under Zephyrian rule. The Karathi were excellent engineers but had been forced to build Zephyrian weapons for decades. The Mindari were natural pilots, but were only allowed to fly cargo ships. The Veltans were fierce warriors who had been reduced to manual laborers. Turner sent Commander Ross on a secret mission to contact these enslaved species. Ross took Katie's story with him, translated into dozens of alien languages. The response was explosive. On Karathi Prime, engineer Zekhai watched the footage of Katie's death with his forearms trembling in rage. The Karathi valued children above, all else believing that young minds held the future of their species. Seeing a child murdered for trying to help others violated everything they believed in. "The humans offer us freedom," Zekhai told his resistance cell. "They ask nothing in return except that we fight alongside them." The Mindari pilot Nalara had similar feelings when she saw Katie's sacrifice. In Mindari culture, protecting the innocent was the highest honor a warrior could achieve. Katie had tried to protect adults who were afraid, and she had died for it. "This human child showed more courage than any Zephyrian soldier," Nalara declared. "If we don't fight to avenge her, we don't deserve freedom." Within a month, secret resistance movements on 50 different worlds were coordinating with human military forces. The Zephyrians had ruled through fear and division, keeping their subject species separated and suspicious of each other. Now, Katie's story gave them something to unite around. The first joint operation took place at a Zephyrian supply depot in the Outer Rim. Captain Park led 3 human destroyers alongside 2 Karathi engineering ships and a squadron of Mindari fighters. The attack was planned perfectly, with each species contributing their special skills. The Karathi disabled the depot's shields while the Mindari pilots flew precision strikes against the weapon emplacements. Park's destroyers finished off the Zephyrian defenders before they could call for help. The entire battle lasted less than 30 minutes, but the most important part happened after the fighting ended. Park broadcast Katie's story to every Zephyrian prisoner they captured, along with footage of the different species working together. "This is what your empire created," she told them. "You killed an innocent child to maintain your power, and now the galaxy has united against you." The Zephyrian officers looked confused and afraid. They had never seen anything like this cooperation between different species. In their rigid military culture, only strength through domination mattered. They couldn't understand how the death of one small human could inspire such massive resistance. News of the victory spread quickly through both human space and the underground networks of enslaved species. More worlds began to rebel. More species joined the growing alliance. The careful order that the Zephyrians had maintained for centuries was falling apart. Commander Vex Thule, still stationed on New Eden, received reports of the spreading rebellion with growing alarm. His superiors were demanding explanations for how the execution of one human child had triggered galaxy-wide war. He looked out at the human colony where Katie had lived and died. The colonists went about their daily work. But something had changed in their eyes. They no longer looked at him with fear. Now they looked at him with something much more dangerous. The quiet certainty that his time was running out. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled for 800 years. But Katie Miller had been dead for only 2 months and their control was already crumbling. 6 months after Katie Miller's death, the Zephyrian Empire was collapsing faster than anyone had imagined possible. What had started as a small human colony's tragedy had become the spark that set the entire galaxy on fire. Rebellion burned across hundreds of worlds as species that had been enslaved for centuries finally found the courage to fight back. Commander Vex Thule stood in his command center on New Eden, watching reports stream in from across the Empire. Every day brought news of another defeat, another world lost to the growing alliance of freed species. His yellow eyes, once so cold and confident, now showed something he had never felt before. Fear. The humans had done something that the Zephyrians thought was impossible. Instead of conquering territory for themselves, they were giving freedom to every species they liberated. The Karathi were building better ships than ever before, now that they could use their engineering skills for their own people. The Mindari pilots flew with a joy and skill that amazed everyone who saw them. Even the peaceful Veltans had become fierce warriors when fighting for their children's future. Admiral Turner's strategy was working perfectly. The Zephyrian military was designed to fight other rigid, hierarchical armies. They couldn't adapt to facing dozens of different species, each with their own fighting styles, all united by a common cause. Every battle was different and the Zephyrians never knew what to expect. But the most devastating weapon in the human arsenal wasn't ships or guns. It was Katie's story itself. Every time human forces liberated a world, they broadcast the footage of the 12-year-old girl's sacrifice. They showed how she had died trying to protect others and how her death had united the galaxy against cruelty and oppression. The effect on Zephyrian soldiers was dramatic. Many had joined the military because they believed their empire brought order to the galaxy. They had been taught that other species were weak and needed Zephyrian guidance. But Katie's story showed them something different. It showed them that their empire's strength was really just the ability to murder children. On the industrial world of Zeftar, Colonel Kexmore received news that his own troops were refusing orders to fire on civilian populations. When he demanded an explanation, his sergeant handed him a datapad showing Katie's final moments. "Sir," the sergeant said quietly, "if our empire's power depends on killing children like this, then maybe we're not the good guys after all." Kexmore watched the footage in silence. He saw Katie offering flowers to a Zephyrian commander trying to make him smile. He saw her volunteering to die so that adults could live to take care of their families. He saw the cold execution that followed, carried out in front of people who loved her. "Stand down all weapons," Kexmore ordered. "We're surrendering to the next human fleet that arrives." Similar scenes played out across the Empire. Zephyrian officers who had once been proud warriors began questioning everything they had been taught. The rigid military culture that had held the Empire together for 8 centuries was cracking under the weight of a single human child's moral example. The final battle came sooner than anyone expected. A massive Zephyrian fleet, one of the last loyal forces in the Empire, made its way to New Eden. Their plan was simple: destroy the human colony where the rebellion had started, and show the galaxy that the Empire could still strike back. Admiral Turner intercepted them with the largest fleet in human history. But he wasn't alone. Ships from 50 different species had joined him, all volunteers who wanted to be present when justice was finally served. The Karathi brought their newest battleships. The Mindari flew their fastest fighters. Even the peaceful Telthari sent medical ships to help treat the wounded. The battle took place in the same space where Katie used to play with her friends and pick flowers for grumpy alien commanders. It was fitting, Turner thought, that her story would end where it began. Commander Vexithul led the Zephyrian defense from his flagship, the same vessel he had used to terrorize dozens of worlds. But as the battle raged around him, he could see that his forces were outnumbered and outfought. The Alliance ships moved with a coordination that his rigid military training couldn't match. More importantly, half of his own fleet was defecting in the middle of the battle. Zephyrian captains who had seen Katie's story were switching sides, turning their weapons against their former comrades. The empire that had been built on fear and obedience was destroying itself. The battle ended when Vexthul's flagship was surrounded by human vessels. He could have fought to the death as Zephyrian honor demanded. Instead, he found himself thinking about the small human girl who had offered him flowers all those months ago. Admiral Turner's voice came over the communication system. "Commander Vexthul, you're ordered to surrender immediately. Your empire is finished." For a long moment, Vexthul said nothing. Then slowly he gave the order that no Zephyrian commander had ever given before. "All ships, stand down. We surrender." The news of Vexthul's surrender spread across the galaxy within hours. The Zephyrian Empire, which had ruled for 8 centuries, officially ceased to exist. The last emperor abdicated rather than face trial for crimes against innocent species. Military governors across hundreds of worlds laid down their weapons and begged for mercy. But the humans surprised everyone again. Instead of executing their enemies or enslaving them in return, they offered something unprecedented: forgiveness and a chance to help build something better. John Miller was present when Vexthul was brought to New Eden for trial. The man who had killed his daughter stood before him in chains, no longer the proud warrior but a broken alien who finally understood the magnitude of what he had done. "Why?" Vexthul asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why did she offer herself? For others? Why didn't she run or fight or try to save herself?" John looked at the alien commander for a long time before answering. "Because that's who Katie was. She always tried to help others, even when it was dangerous for her. She believed that everyone deserved kindness, even people who were mean to her." "I don't understand," Vexthul said. "I know," John replied sadly. "That's why your empire fell. You never understood that real strength comes from protecting others, not from hurting them." The trial lasted 3 weeks. Vexthul was found guilty of murder and crimes against sentient beings. But instead of execution, his sentence was to spend the rest of his life helping to rebuild the worlds his empire had destroyed. He would work alongside the species he had once oppressed, learning what it meant to create instead of destroy. 1 year after Katie's death, representatives from over 300 species gathered on New Eden for the signing of the Galactic Charter of Rights. The document, written in memory of a 12-year-old human girl, established principles that would govern the galaxy for generations to come. The first article was simple but revolutionary. No being, regardless of age, species, or status, shall be harmed for the actions of others or used as an example to create fear. John and Linda Miller attended the ceremony, along with all the original colonists of New Eden. They planted the first tree in what would become the Katie Miller Memorial Garden, a place where beings from across the galaxy could come to remember the child whose death had changed everything. As the ceremony ended, something magical happened. The local shimmerwings, the butterfly-like creatures that Katie had loved, filled the sky in numbers never seen before. They danced around the memorial in patterns of light and color, as if the planet itself was celebrating the peace that had grown from tragedy. Katie Miller had lived for only 12 years, but her legacy would last forever. Her story became legend, told on every world where beings gathered to remember that sometimes the smallest light can drive away the greatest darkness. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. True strength isn't the power to destroy, but the courage to protect those who cannot protect themselves. And in the end, that lesson proved stronger than any empire built on fear.